Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. And we're so glad that you decided to tune in today, whether you're watching us as a podcast or if you're listening to us as a podcast. We're really happy that you decided to be in our audience. We wouldn't be the same without you. We love comments and questions, so feel free.
Yeah, and we wanted to remind everybody also about the Voice of Indie podcast immediately following our show. It's over on Blog Talk Radio, and the instructions are on the last commercial on our show at the end of the show. So stay tuned, and they tell you exactly how to get over there to listen to that podcast. We'll also want to remind everybody about Book World, The Great Escape on YouTube at CJ Peterson weekly. That's 1 o'clock Central Time here in the U.S. Episode Rewind this Saturday, September 9th, is going to be, that's Eastern Time here in the U.S., Savannah Loy. And she had a really good episode, I remember. Live next week will be Terry M. Brown. She'll be back with us. And she has a new release, An Enemy Like Me, to talk about on the show. So what else is new? Anything?
I can't think of anything new.
No, I can't either.
I hope you were able to watch our other podcast when we went over everything that happened at Hill House. That was a fun show.
Right.
I'm sorry. We have an editorial from our dog already.
Yeah, Missy's talking to us here. Anyway.
Somebody got a delivery.
Yeah. So let's, without much ado here, live from Australia.
Yeah.
It's for him. It's Thursday morning. Is author Phillip Strang. Hi, Phillip.
Yeah, hi.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, or morning here. It's 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's true. And depending on where people are watching us from, it can be any time of the day or listening to us. Well, we're so glad that you could join us. Oh, Marjorie Deering's here. Marjorie says, hello all, I'm here for the highlight of my Wednesday evening. Yay. Thanks, Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie.
Well, I'll tell you what, Marjorie, you're one of the highlights of our show.
That's right.
And Marjorie Deering says, oh, Phillip, I love your accent.
Well, it's actually English.
Mm-hmm.
I came to Australia in 1969, but I believe my English accent is still recognizable in Australia. If I go to England, though, they say, well, it's not quite English anymore because there's some Australian in there. So a combination.
So you've kind of gone over to the Aussie side, according to your friends in England, and to the Aussies, you're still quite British.
Oh, after COVID ended, and I went into a chemist and he thought I was a tourist. He said, how long have you been here? A couple of days.
Isn't that funny?
Just here for a visit, right?
But I've been here over 50 years.
There you go.
Wow. You immigrated there 50 years ago?
69.
Wow.
69. Back then you were called a 10-pound POM because you had to pay £10 for the assisted passage. And for some reason, they used to call the English POMs back then.
Isn't that interesting? That's crazy.
I don't know if they do that anymore. I certainly haven't heard it for a long time.
Yeah. I wonder, too, if it's different, the immigration laws now, because a lot of countries are changing their immigration laws and making it more difficult for people to immigrate. And
there was certainly, I suspect, a White Australia policy. It was sort of not official back in the 60s, but definitely not now. And people from everywhere in the world are welcome to come, as long as they fill in a piece of paper. But
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, well, I think that Probably it's always been easier though for someone from England to immigrate to Australia. I know that.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the 60s, yes, anyone from England could come to Australia.
Yeah.
Not now, not the situation's changed now, but
Right.
certainly back in the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying. All the immigration laws used to be quite different, I think, all over the world, and now things have tightened up different places.
Mm.
Yeah. We have a whole immigration thing going on here.
Yes, yes.
That's for sure.
No, it's not like it used to be at all. So, but I guess I can understand that.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Phillip is the author of more than 35 books, murder mysteries and thrillers.
Yes.
And boy, what got you started heading in that direction?
I suppose it was my wife and my daughter who said, well, you should sit down and write, because I'd traveled a lot. I'd been to a lot of, although we haven't mentioned it yet, but I mean, I spent about 20 years overseas building mobile phone networks, or the infrastructure, or cell phone networks, as you would know in America. And I went to a lot of very unusual parts of the world and met a lot of very interesting people. Yes. So they said, well, you should sit down and write. And I did. And I found words just poured out of me. I mean, for the first year or so, I would sit down and write 10 to 12,000 words in a day.
Wow.
I couldn't do that now. I definitely couldn't do that now. But they just poured out of me, all these stories. But of course, it was just, at that point in time, it was just stories of places I'd been, characters I'd met, changed the names, changed some of the certain aspects.
Yeah. Had you always?
That's what got me started, and then I found that I could do it, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I think on reflection, I've got more satisfaction out of writing than any other venture in my life.
How did you first publish? When you went to publish your first book, how did you do it?
Initially, on the first book, I thought I was writing the great novel, so I sent it off to various publishers, and they came back and told me quite politely that it wasn't the great novel. That's when I got on YouTube, and then I started researching, and eventually I self-published on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the easy way to begin. Marjorie Deering says that's a deluge. And Marjorie knows because she's an author also.
Yes.
That is a deluge, right? Only that we could sit down and write 10 to 12,000 words a day, I would be happy.
I wouldn't be able to do it now, because I'm a much more critical. At that point in time, I was just writing.
Right.
And I suspect of the 10 to 12,000 that I wrote, probably half of them ended up being deleted eventually, as I tried to put it into a story.
Right. Yeah, that's the difficult part, isn't it? When we have to self-edit and go back, and I know we change things constantly. Don't like it when I reread it.
But I mean, I'd been to so many interesting places. I mean, we lived in Pakistan for 3 years. I was in Afghanistan for a year with a private company. This was 2003. So it's not long after the Taliban were kicked out. And they were keeping a low profile at that time. It's strange, though, because of the Taliban and their strict adherence to law and order, you used to see quite a few guys with one hand, because that was what they did to a thief. And it was safe. It was safe because no one would indulge in crime at that point in time.
Yeah, because they were terrified.
And of course, if you've been to a place like that, and you've been to all of these major cities in Afghanistan and also Pakistan, you meet a lot of people, you see a lot of scenery, a lot of characters. I also was interested in the history. So there was plenty of material to write about.
Yeah, especially seeing everything that you saw up close and personal.
Oh, yes.
Well, let me ask you a question that everyone usually wants to know. And if you are not familiar with these terms, let me know. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
Pantser.
Yeah, fly by the seat of your pants and just write, no outline.
I tried in the early days to plot, but I found it didn't work for me. So basically, I just sit down, sometimes with an idea, sometimes not, and I just write forward, and I write from the beginning to the end. I don't write bits at the end or bits in the middle or any of that. I just write from the beginning to the end. I'm not sure it's the ideal way to do it, but it's the only way that works for me at this present time.
I think that, I think everybody has to write the way that they need to write, and I don't think there's any right way or wrong way. I really don't.
Right.
I mean, there's
Right.
a lot of discussion about, first person, second person, third person, and, and what type of third person omniscient. And I think that, I think you need to write the way that you need to write and not worry about all that stuff.
I know with crime thrillers that as I'm writing, I myself do not ultimately know who the culprit is, who's the murderer, until basically the last chapter, almost the last paragraph, because it's working to a culmination. So if no one's ever said it, but if they said I figured it out halfway through, they didn't, because I had no clue at this point in time. At that point in time.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, has that been true with all of your books?
Yes, I believe so.
That is really amazing. Oh, you are a true pantser.
Right.
Yes, because as it's moving forward, you end up with 3 or 4 potential murderers, and everyone's got a story, or would have been glad if the person had died for one reason or the other. So I think the story just works through, and eventually people drop away because they obviously couldn't be the murderer. You might want them to be the murderer because they were a nasty piece of work, but that doesn't mean they're the murderer in the end. So it's going to be the last chapter or the last paragraph or so before I reach that point.
That's incredible. I've never known anyone that wrote like that. I think that we're pantsers, but and things change as we're writing because the characters take you on a different path maybe than you were intending to go. You know what I mean? Your characters all of a sudden are, going this way and you wanted to go that way. But we've always known who the villain was.
Right.
And worked around the villain, but
no, I've never known who the villain's going to be. I'm writing I'm sort of halfway through on a couple of books. One's based in Australia, one's based in England. Australia's up to about 40,000 words. There's 2 or 3 people in there that potentially could be the murderer, but I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue. It'll just work its way through, and they'll get to a point in time where I sort of find it's difficult to write on, and you just have to write through it and sort of clarify where it is. But I certainly haven't got a clue who is the murderer. Not a clue.
That's really interesting. Now, which one of your series is that in that you're writing now?
I'm writing the 3rd book on the series based in Sydney.
Okay, that's.
And I'm also writing another book based in London.
So this is your latest books here, Dark Streets, yeah.
And Pinch Gut.
And Pinch Gut right here. And that's the same heroine, right? That's the Sergeant Natalie Campbell series, is that right?
Sergeant Natalie Campbell.
Okay. And that takes place.
That's based in Sydney. Sydney.
That's It looked like Sydney.
Yeah.
Well, that's Sydney Harbour Bridge, and that's
Kind of looks like
that's a ferry on the down the bottom right-hand side of Circular Quay.
Interesting. Okay. And now, so is now this book going to be part of the Sergeant Natalie Campbell series?
Yes, it'll be the same. It'll be Sergeant Natalie Campbell.
So that'll be book number 3. Okay.
All right. That'll be the third in the series. Hold on. We've got a comment here. Oh, Paul Rushworth Brown. Hi from Sydney. He is from Sydney. You remembered correctly.
That's what I thought.
Paul,
Hi, Paul.
really want you to meet this author because he would really like to know other authors also in Australia, but it's really awesome that you're both in
Sydney. So
in Sydney.
you guys need to connect.
I did after air get together yesterday. I did check Paul on the internet anyway.
Did you?
Did
Okay,
you?
cool.
Yeah.
I did look him up.
Yeah, he can tell you all about that fair that we were telling you about.
The
And
book fair, yes.
Coming up in October.
Marjorie Daring says, I think most of us pantsers write with at least one leg in our trousers rather than jumping in with both at the last minute. It's amazing that you're able to do what you do. Right, Marjorie? That I'm
impressed with that. That's crazy.
I am so impressed, and it's amazing. So Paul, meet Philip, meet Paul. And you two, I will put up some of his, the places that you can get in touch with him, but I'll do that later. Right now, we're talking about his books, and his latest series is the Sergeant Campbell series, and that all takes place, I guess, then in Sydney, right?
Yes, I'm not sure how far that series will go. I thought it was important to get 3 books out in a reasonable time period to see how they go. It's also given me the opportunity to promote more in Australia, my books, because primarily my readership's always been in the UK.
And well, this is good, since that's your home, to be writing about your home and being able to get it. That's
good.
That's really good. And I like that you have a female protagonist in this one. How was that for you?
I must admit, I tried to change it. It's too easy to have the gruff detective inspector and his young offsider, invariably female. I mean, you see that too often. And I have a situation in the Australian one that the young sergeant is more astute and more capable than the inspector. And I have a problem if I continue the series forward, is that she is more capable than being a sergeant. I can't leave her with the inspector the way it is at this point in time. I'm not sure how if you're writing a series, how do you promote someone and still maintain the storyline? I'm not sure on that yet.
I bet that you can do it,
work
though.
that out, I'm sure.
Well, she'd have to become inspector. And does she stay with Haddock? I quite like her with the Chief Inspector Haddock. I mean, to have her go off on her own, I'd have to think about how to do that. Or I won't think about it. I'll start writing it.
Yes, that's right. And then it'll write itself out. Paul says, unfortunately, I will not be going to the fair in October. They wanted to charge me $300 for the use of the main stage before and after the fair. Wow. I'm sorry. We were looking forward to all of your interviews from there, Paul. That's too bad that's not going to happen. You won't even be having your books there or anything, Paul? Nothing like that? It'll take him a while to answer that because he has to type it and everything.
He's all the way in Australia. So,
yeah, but so is Philip. So.
Oh, yeah. That's right. We have technology.
I'm sure that you can work that out where she's promoted, especially if she's the one with all the intuition and the smarts.
Let's take our first break.
Oh.
To satisfy the sponsors here, our wonderful sponsors. And we'll be back in about 3 minutes, so nobody go away, okay?
Yep. Stay tuned, okay?
Stay tuned.
It's 1919, and Eric Laska returns from the war in Europe. 2 new enemies await him in the small coal mining town he calls home. One is a threat to his relationship with Rebecca, the love of his life. The other, a bloodthirsty beast, is stalking the mining town residents. The townspeople suspect Eric of one of the killings. An old man and Rebecca's 11-year-old sister have seen the beast, but only Eric believes their story. To protect the town and clear his name, he's forced to prove the werewolf exists. Available on Amazon. The Horror Within by Marjorie Swift Doring.
The clock is ticking. Can Gracie uncover the truth?
Phillip Pliant is the wealthy opportunist plastics dealer and CEO of Pliant Industries. He's also a master thief, creating a pervasive threat to the manufacturing infrastructure in the Caribbean islands markets. With the cartel as his stealth client, the naive city leaders have been seduced, enabling the production of more than 3-dimensional building materials.
The expected profits are monstrous.
Is the art group, now led by Gracie and the family heirs, strong enough to win against this predator?
Can JJ's cats act on the root cause analysis in time?
Will Gracie be able to squash Pliant and the cartels?
Gracie never considered their lives would hang in the balance. The clock is ticking. 5, 4, 3.
Paradise, my prison. Charlie Flint awakens from a deep sleep and finds himself alone on a tropical beach surrounded by a palm tree jungle and exotic animals. He cannot remember who he is or anything about his life. First, he must find food and build shelter and protect himself from hidden dangers. As his memory gradually returns, it reveals what a very flawed person he is. A man who made too many mistakes, made too many enemies. The implications of the truth are staggering. How did Charlie get there? And will he save himself? Paradise, My Prison is the riveting new suspense thriller from retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. Paradise, My Prison by George Dismukes is available in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide.
And we're back.
Okay.
Okay, so we talked about your latest series, which is Sergeant Natalie Campbell. And now you have a conundrum, how to make her a DI.
Well, how to take the story forward, because she can't stay as a young sergeant to the current inspector indefinitely.
Right.
But let's see how it goes. I don't even think about moving it forward. I've not considered that at this point in time. I'm just wading through another story at the present moment, so
got to get that out of the way first.
You'll figure it out, I'm sure.
You will.
It'll have a way of writing itself, I think.
Oh yes, I have to sit down. I think it's good that I do have the time and a quiet spot where I can sit down and write. But I find that writing, in the early days, writing came easy. Nowadays, I need to sit down and focus on it. And I'm probably, if I can get 2,000 to 3,000 words out in a day, that's about it, I think.
That's still good.
That's real good.
That's very good.
Oh, yes.
Keep up that pace. And you'll still enjoy it. Do what you can enjoy.
We co-authors, so there's a lot of talking and rewriting that goes on as we write.
Well, also as a self-published author, you have to understand, and it's unfortunate that to maintain momentum, if you're self-publishing on Amazon, for instance, that you really have to put a book out every 3 months if you want to maintain decent rankings, because you'll soon drop off because you're an unknown quantity. You'll soon be forgotten. So I try to adhere to it. I don't always succeed because I found it tougher during COVID than I do now to write.
I think, don't you think, though, that was a very stressful time for everybody? I mean, when we were all quarantined and, you couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And That was difficult. It was very stressful.
It was a strange time.
It was, and I think it's really left a mark on people. I really do.
Yes, it's changed. It's one of those defining moments that
It is.
has affected society.
It definitely.
Yeah.
Society has changed since.
Globally.
You are
yeah.
absolutely right.
Yes.
So Paul says, unfortunately, we couldn't negotiate, even though I didn't charge authors. Plus, I could only do interviews before and after the fair opens and closes. However, I'm looking at other options for you guys. A friend of mine works for the ABC. I'll keep you updates. That's okay, Paul. We feel bad for you. We're fine over here, but I'm sorry that you weren't able to do that. I know you were looking forward to it.
Can I say that I'd like to meet up with Paul sometime if he's in Sydney? I should say that I'm in Edgecliff near Double Bay, so he'll probably know where that is.
Oh,
Okay.
no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, actually, right now, before we finish talking about your books, let me let people know where they can find you. His website is www.phillipstrang.com, and that's PhillipStrang. All right, that's his website. And I assume, Phillip, that all of your books can be found on your website?
All my books are there, yes.
Okay, so you can find all of his books and just peruse all of the different covers and see all the different series and see what you would be interested in. And you can then buy them on Amazon. Facebook is Phillip Strang Writer, and that's WRITER, that kind of writer.
Mm-hmm.
You can find him there on Facebook. And then, Paul, you can email him at phillip@phillipstrang.com. And of course, anyone can email him there at phillip@phillipstrang.com. Do you want to do the book giveaway now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that and get it so people can get entered into it. Our book giveaway tonight, the first 3 people to email phillip@phillipstrang.com will win an ebook copy of Death Unholy. And do you want to tell us a little bit about Death Unholy?
Let's bring that up.
Let's find it here.
That'll be at the end. Right there.
There it is.
Yep.
Let's take that other email banner down so we can see the cover. So everybody go ahead and enter. And I tell you what, even if you're watching this after the live show has aired, feel free to go ahead and email Phillip at phillipstrang.com, and he may have extra copies available that he'd like to send to you. So,
no problems to me. I must have given away tens of thousands of Death Unholy over the years. No problems.
There you go.
And it's Phillip@phillipstrang.com.
Yep.
So, Paul, if you could email him there and introduce yourself to him, and then maybe you guys can get together and meet and help each other out. Whoops, sorry. Yes. Well, let's go back to your series.
Yeah. Can you give us like a little overview of the Tremaine series?
I was writing about DCI Isaac Cook, which is based in London. He's a DCI Isaac Cook in London. He's the son of Jamaican immigrants. The reason I chose that was because I worked in Jamaica for a year. My wife and myself were in Jamaica for a year. So that gave me the idea for Jamaica. Actually, the character is based on someone I met in Africa, who's actually Senegalese. And he's certainly not Jamaican. And but the character was there, tall, urbane, dark, handsome guy, always wore a suit. Tremaine is based in Salisbury. And the reason I chose Salisbury is because I grew up in Salisbury, or at least when I say I grew up in Salisbury, I lived there from about the age of 9 up until 21 when I came to Australia. So it's where I went to school, Salisbury. And Salisbury, for those who know of Salisbury, who've been there, it's got a lot of history, a lot of old history there, a lot of interesting places. And Death Unholy, I came up with the concept and of a desolate village down the end of a lane, which a couple of 100 years ago would have been isolated from the world, but now is accessible. And then I'm not even sure I went to the village. It's near Salisbury. You get on Google Street View and you can drive through, and you can drive up every little alley and laneway and whatever else. You can see the church and whatever. That was my first book in the series. I tried to make it a little obscure, sort of things that go bump in the night, the atmosphere of a lonely village in the countryside in England in winter, hardly anyone around. These places lend themselves for thinking of doom and gloom, and I thought it turned out okay. And then I subsequently wrote another 9 books in the Tremaine series. Yet again, I'm not sure how to go forward on that, because Tremaine was always complaining about his old age and his aches and pains. And Claire Yarwood, his offsider, yet again, the young female offsider. I mean, she can't stay as a sergeant, and she's just had a child. So that's going to make a different dynamics to it. I'm not sure I want to go into a prequel or whatever, what happened before they met up or so on. But I like the characters and I like the story. And people have asked me before, because the inspector's sort of taciturn type of guy. And they say, well, who's he based on? I would say he's based on me, basically. Although I don't drink and I don't smoke and I don't swear and I don't complain about aches and pains, but I think there's a lot of similarities there.
George Dismukes is in the house. He said, "Egad, sorry, better late than never."
Welcome aboard.
Hi, George.
Hi.
We're so glad that you're here. This is Philip. I think that you would really like him. And you won't believe this, George, but when he writes a mystery, he doesn't know until the last chapter who done it. And he's the author. So we're all really quite impressed with that, to say the least. So Tremaine, okay, so now there are 9 books in the Tremaine series, right? Yeah.
10,
so
10 now.
10 now. So yeah, if he's complaining from the first one that, he's getting old and and creaks when he walks, and then I see what you're saying there.
I love the titles of the Tremaine series. You have Death Unholy, of course. You have Death and the Assassin's Blade, Death and the Lucky Man, Death at Coombe Farm, Dead Man's Hand, Death in the Village, Burial Mound, Body in the Ditch, The Horse's Mouth, and Montfield's Madness.
Death in the Assassin's Blade. The idea for that came from, if you're in Salisbury, outside of Salisbury, there's a place called Old Sarum. That's not actually Old Sarum. That's a place called Corf's Castle in Dorset. But Old Sarum's an old Anglo-Saxon fort, and I can remember from my childhood, the Amateur Dramatic Society used to do open-air productions up there of a night time. So they were doing a production of Julius Caesar, and so you have the scene where the conspirators all get together and put a dagger into Julius Caesar, except one of them wasn't a plastic retractable blade. One was an actual blade. And of course, the question is who changed it and who dealt the blow that killed the guy who was playing Julius Caesar.
Tu Brute.
Death on the Lucky Farm, The Lucky Man, was about a guy who won the lottery, a most undeserving character who went crazy with the money and ultimately ended up being killed as a result of it. And,
yikes.
Okay.
And strange, Death at Coombe Farm. The idea for that came because when I was at school, I had a friend who lived on a farm, and I went out there and stayed there a couple of times. And then I'm looking on the internet, and I find that not him, but his brother's in serious conflict with the mother about the inheritance of the farm, who takes over the farm, and it went as far as the High Court in London. So I could imagine the farm. I could imagine the environment. So a lot of them, you tend to come like that, I suppose. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the Cook series. Is Murder House the first one? And
the second one.
That's the second?
Yeah. Tricky Business is
Tricky
first,
Business.
I think, right?
I think we've got that.
Yeah, Murder is a tricky business. I that was the first in the series. For the second book, Isaac Cook had changed his offsider to an English guy, because the first guy was a migrant to England from Pakistan, and that always presented problems, because I always find it difficult writing about people from those parts of the world, because I've been to those parts of the world. I know the people, and people's perception is different to my perception. You know, I've been to Pakistan, and I know they're lovely people, and basically they're polite. They're very polite and very nice and very calm. But of course, that perception doesn't always come across. So I wrote that book, and then I changed out and went with an English guy for Murder House. And yet again, I read an article in I think it was in America, where they were demolishing a house, and they found a guy who had tried to burgle the house and climbed down the chimney and got stuck in the chimney and died in the chimney, and he'd been there for 30, 40 years or something or other.
Yeah.
It wasn't Santa Claus, was it?
Huh? Yeah, well, he thought he was Santa Claus, but he didn't quite make it. He got stuck. So that was the idea for that.
Oh.
You know, when you hear those stories, and you do hear them, I'm always thinking, didn't anyone smell anything? I mean, come on.
Yeah, you'd think so.
I know. When you have an animal die, there's an odor, so never mind a body.
So DCI Isaac Cook, you have 16 books with that one, right?
17, I think. 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of books in a series. That's great.
Yeah, I think I could write on that story. It tends to be centered around Notting Hill, Paddington, Kensington area, Knightsbridge, that sort of area. I'm not sure if I can move the story out of that particular area, but there's a lot. If you go to London's got a lot of places you can write about, a lot of history there that you can get involved in, and you can go on Google Street View. You can dive down everywhere there.
I love that there's a Google Street. I really do.
Oh,
because,
yes.
you know, what we know of as Google is Ask Google.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but I love that name.
There you go. We should probably do our commercial.
Our next commercial?
Our last commercial break.
All right. Hold on just for a minute, and we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Behold, this one about a man, a woman, a black jaguar, and an ancient Maya legend. Two Faces of the Jaguar is a novel by George Dismukes that will take you deep into the jungle and capture your imagination until the last word. Two Faces of the Jaguar is book one of a trilogy. Two Faces of the Jaguar, where only the adventurous dare to read.
Two Faces of the Jaguar, The Lost City, and The Jaguar's Quest are available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Two Faces of the Jaguar, the book people are talking about. Get your copy today.
Mystery hovers in the Magnolia Bluff Public Library. It has nothing to do with the hundreds of suspense novels on its shelves. Caroline McCluskey is the librarian. She finds a crimson hat and a black and white poodle puppy. They belong to Esther Williams. Esther is missing. The police can't find her. Neither can the FBI. Esther's only hope is a ring of 3 women investigators who form the Round Table. The Round Table has already solved one mystery in town, but this time, a woman's life is at stake. The Doggone Diamond Dilemma is now available on Amazon.
Madison Jackson loved being a cop. A young girl is raped and murdered near Burnett Reservoir. Madison vows to get justice for the child. Madison travels to the heart of Mexican cartel country. She is kidnapped, tortured. Will Madison ever make it home? Justice by Kelly Marshall, only at Amazon.com.
And we're back. So one of your first books were the case series, right?
Yeah, the Haberman virus.
Yeah,
that's an intense book.
Is that the first one?
Yes, yeah, that's the first one.
Okay, of the case series. It's a terrorist series, right?
Yes, it was my early days of writing a book, and I got quite a number of comments from various people saying I shouldn't write things like that. I shouldn't give people ideas. And another one said, well, it could. Another one said, I'm a scientist. It couldn't happen. Well, it could happen. And basically, because I read an article somewhere that CSIRO, which is the research organization in Australia, they were looking into dealing with the mouse plague. Occasionally, they get a lot of a mouse plague in the countryside here. And what they were going to do is they were going to genetically engineer and introduce mousepox into the population with a genetically engineered protein, which is in the body, which is called IL-4, and it's genetic. Each species has a different version of the IL-4. So, but what they found was it was meant to act as onto the anti-immune system and become like a contraceptive. But they found with the mice, it just killed them dead. So the concept was, and I did read about it, was that you could do that to smallpox, and you would have smallpox with this IL-4, and it would effectively kill people, and it would kill hundreds of millions of people. Now, I got a lot of flack about it, and then several years later, Bill Gates said it was the greatest terror threat of all, the potential of this. But it was intense. I did so much scientific research on it to try and understand it. I was wondering I didn't get a knock on the door saying, why are you looking up things like this? Right? Because it was incredibly complex.
The things we do, right?
Yeah.
I think in truth, the book should have been one of these 600-page monsters.
Yeah.
To do it justice and to wind it along, whereas I couldn't do that at that point in time. I'm not even sure I could do it now.
Yeah.
But I was sort of pleased with that book, but crime thrillers sell a lot better, actually.
Yeah, but you enjoyed writing that one and doing the research. And then Malika's Revenge was also in your case series. That's a really great cover. I got to say, I love it.
Well, I did the cover. So
Beautiful.
I did the cover.
The
The only cover I didn't do is the Haberman virus.
Oh.
But after that, I didn't do that cover. I paid someone to do that cover. The problem is if you get an ebook cover, then you're going to need a paperback cover, and then you're going to need a 3D version of the book. Then you're going to need a Facebook banner, and so on and so on. It all sort of builds up. So I've been doing them myself on Photoshop.
Oh, they look great to me.
All your covers look really good.
But Malika's Revenge is the book I enjoyed most because it was very detailed, and I based it on a story I saw it in an English newspaper. It was about a drug smuggler's village just across the northern border from Kunduz in Afghanistan into Tajikistan. It was like the end of the road where gangsters were, and women who reached the end of the line who were heroin addicted. It was pretty grim and nasty, and Afghan smugglers coming across the river of a night time, dodging the police and the military, or paying them off, or whatever else. So it was very detailed. So it was a Tajiki drug baron, Russian Secret Service, Afghan warlords, and so on and so on. And I enjoyed writing that, and it's quite detailed. But I found a lot of people found it was a fairly grim subject to write about. But I'd also been to Kunduz in northern Afghanistan, one of our trips up to there. So I knew the environment. I could feel the place. I could feel it. I'd never been to a drug smuggler's village, but I could feel the environment. I knew what I was writing about.
Mm-hmm. Well, death and murder is, it's not pleasant either. So, but
yes,
I think some people are like that sort of thing. I think, they like the suspense and they like the terror. And Marjorie's in our audience right now, and she writes about horror and very well.
Yeah.
She's a lovely person. And writes very scary stuff. George Dismuke says, "Hey, Philip, what's it like doing book marketing, like book signings, etc., down under?" For example, he means.
I've not actually done any in Australia. It's only recent that I started writing about Australia. My market was into England, so I've not really done any here. My marketing is primarily through an email list, which is hard to build. You can either try and generate people onto an email list through Book Magnet in your books, which I do, and or you can do Facebook lead generation ads, which is the only place to basically get emails from. But that's quite costly, and I think a lot of the emails that I gain through Facebook are not very good, actually.
Now,
so
George does a lot of, George is an author, and he does a lot of book signings, and he does quite well at them. And so that's perhaps something you should consider, is finding like a bookstore that would allow you to set up. Or George likes to do them in restaurants and places like that.
I think that, you've got such a selection of books, even though they're based in England. I think the Australian readers would love them as well.
Yeah, I do too.
So I think you've got quite a market out there.
Yeah. I think your English, your series, all of your series that take place in England would be, people in Australia and America, and Japan would all like to read about that.
I've started to become to do that more in Australia. I have been to a couple of authors' book signings in the last few weeks in Australia, and I've started to promote heavily my books more into Australia and having some success. I mean, Australia is a relatively small market in the scheme of things, but I mean, there's still quite a lot of people. There's still a lot of people here.
Right.
So I did go to one the other day, Australian author. Paul might know of him, Tim Aliff, and I bought one of his books. I didn't get him to sign it. I don't think I needed the signed book, but I did buy one of his books. I thought it was very good, actually. I did think it was very good. I did enjoy it.
Excellent. Well,
So,
George just said his books are based in Central America, and it really doesn't matter. The story is what matters.
yes.
And I think people like reading about different countries too.
Mm.
And you've done so much research, like in your terrorists, you've lived in all those places. And George also lived in Central America, and so he knows that.
Well,
and
really
so then
speaks
when
to the
you
people who
write
read,
that, yes, that comes across in your work. And Marjorie also said, "Oh, thank you. The horror story was a needed break after my 7 Ray Schiller murder novels. I told someone it was like rotating my tires, not fun, but necessary."
There you go.
Oh my goodness. That's really fun, Marjorie.
I could enjoy writing some more different genres. Yes, Montfield's Madness, which was the last of the Tremaine series, was slightly different. I wrote a book called Verrill's Nightmare, which had a touch of the occult in it, and I enjoyed writing that. But if you've built up a market in writing crime thrillers, then you need to build a market in the other genres as well. And I've tried several times, and I really want to do it. I really want to get Malika's Revenge to go, because I think the depth of that book is interesting. I prefer that. It's not everyone's cup of tea, because it dives into some people in pretty bad situations, so I didn't want to. Not everyone goes for it, but Malika's Revenge is the book I'm possibly most proud of.
That's good. Now, Paul Rushworth Brown says, "I market my novels and other coins like India and the UK, where they're really popular." And we told you his books are all historical novels and very.
Yes, I did say that.
Very
so Paul would know the significance of the second title of my Australian series, Pinch Gut. He would know the significance of that title.
All right. What is the significance? Because I don't have a clue. Pinch Gut.
Okay. That is actually a Fort Denison, which is in Sydney Harbour. It's not far from Circular Quay and the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. And if you're going up the harbour on the Manly Ferry, on a ferry, you go past Pinch Gut. And in the early days, in the early convict days, before trying to think back to what the story now. If they had in the early days when it was a convict settlement and they had difficult prisoners, they'd stick them out there for a while, chained out there on very, very short rations. So when they came back, people would say they had a pinched gut.
Oh.
They didn't actually go pinch their gut.
Because they literally, their punishment was to be stuck on the island in all the elements and starved. There was no fort there at that point in time.
Wow. That's interesting. Unfortunately,
and the only damage that happened to Fort Denison or Pinch Gut, it never fired a shot in anger. It was never used for that purpose. And the only damage incurred to it was from an American Navy cruiser during the Second World War.
Whoops, sorry about that.
No, there was a Japanese subs, miniature subs, mini subs came in to try and attack the naval base in Garden Island, and the Navy cruiser fired at the submarines and hit the side of the tower at Pinch Gut.
Okay, well, I'm not sorry then, because we were
trying to say
it was an accident. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry about that. It was an accident, but
George Dismuke says Captain Bligh was sent to run that prison for a while. Perfect match at Pidgegut.
And they had a mutiny as well with Captain Bligh here as well. They had trouble with Captain Bligh.
That's correct. Paul Rushworth Brown said, Philip, contact my PA Haley and we can organize another interview. HaleyBrownPA@gmail.com.
I'll have to write that down. Haley Brown. Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry. I have to write that down.
That's okay. Haley Brown PA@gmail.com.
At gmail.com. I have to be careful.
All right, it's Haley.
I hardly ever write. My writing's terrible now.
Oh, so is mine. Haley is HAYLEYBROWNPA@gmail.com. You got it?
Yeah, I've got it.
Awesome.
Let us know if you have trouble and we can help.
Yeah, sure.
We can make sure you guys get to chat with each other. That'd be good. Yes. George, you know so much about so many different places. Captain Bligh was sent to run that prison for a while. Perfect match. That's fascinating.
Maybe George was Captain Bligh.
No.
Oh, no.
Stop. All right. So George says, I don't think Bligh ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People.
I think you're 100% right about that.
I do think that he's right about that. Oh dear. Well, this has been an interesting hour.
One thing I really like is that you have so many in each series. I like it when I find an author that I like sticking with it, and the more they have, the better. You know what I'm saying? So, like for the Isaac Cook, you've got 16, 17 books there, which is plenty of reading for people to enjoy.
I've certainly had people who've read all of them. Yes.
Oh yeah. You know what it's like. When your favorite author quits writing your favorite series, you feel bereft.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I actually sold 20 of the series to an American company, the audio rights of 20 of the murder series. I've listened to so little of them because I hear the characters in my head, but when I hear someone else speak it just doesn't ring true for me. So
George says, I love your accent, Philip. It's British, even though he's lived in Australia for 50 years.
You wouldn't believe I can't stand hearing the recording of it.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Oh.
I do believe that, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's still very strong English, even after 53 years in Australia.
That is a long time to be living in Australia.
Maybe that means you don't get out much.
I worked a lot with the English when I was working on overseas, building these phone networks around the world.
I was just kidding.
Well, I moved from Massachusetts when I was 23, and I've lost my Boston accent from Boston, and now I don't. I've picked up different accents from all over the country where we've lived. Sort of.
You don't have a strong American accent, though. It's not strong.
Nope. I've sort of become blended with all the different places that I've lived.
And the dog.
Here's our dog.
Our doggy.
She's acting very oddly tonight.
She's acting like
she's been jumping all over us while we've been talking to you. I don't know what her deal is.
Rather distracting.
Yes. What's the matter, Missy?
Okay.
She's a silly girl. But yeah, this has been wonderful. I am still, honestly, Philip, blown away that you can write the way that you do, that you've been writing so prolifically, and you really don't know who done it until the end of the book yourself. That's amazing.
It's very amazing.
Yes, I mean, I write as it is. I don't think that to do it that way. It's just how it works.
Oh, Paul Hollis says, another interesting show as always. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. We're so glad that you were able to tune in. Paul, can you believe that? I mean, I really, I'm shocked, because I would honestly, Philip, I would have so much stress that I didn't know who done it or how I was going to wrap it all up. I think it would drive me crazy. I really do.
I know when I get to the end of the book, I'm there saying, I'd say to my wife, I'll finish it tomorrow. And sometimes that might go on for 3, 4, 5 days before it actually finishes, because there's another twist and a turn. I can see the person. I ended up with one book where the murderer turned out to be the person I would have preferred not to be the murderer. It wasn't the villain. It was someone unexpected. But that's the way it was. That was the story. I couldn't change it.
We've all talked about this before, how our characters, take us in a direction that we never intended to go.
No.
And that's where the character goes. And that's what you have to write. If you try to write it a different way, it won't happen. You can't write that.
No.
Like you said, you didn't want that person to be the murderer, and they were like, well, I'm the murderer, so live with it.
Well, I think the person who I wanted to be, or who I thought was the murderer, I mean, obviously by the last chapter or the last few paragraphs, I'm getting an inkling of who it should be. And then it became clear that the person the person who I thought it was going to be could not be the murderer. I can't remember why. A wrong place. They weren't in the right place at the right time, or there was a clue that didn't match up, or whatever. I don't know. I can't remember that much now. But I tend not to remember too much about all of the books. I can remember I can remember an overview of each story, but I can't remember all of the details.
Yeah, it's that many books. I can understand. George Dismuke says, Paradise, my prison ending surprised the devil out of me. I had no idea.
Yeah, so
that's how it is.
Yep. That was a good ending too, George. It was shocking.
Yeah, sure.
And surprising.
Well, put you down there. I want to thank you for joining us. This has been very wonderful getting to meet you and hear about your work.
Yes.
And
if you want to just stay on even after the show ends, then Paul Hollis says, PMP, Prison My Paradise. Paradise My Prison. Great book. Yeah. And we remember when George was first writing it, and he would send us chapters and ask us what we thought. And we said, you got to finish the book, because we really need to know what's going on here. We need to know the end. Anyway, stay on, and we can give you Paul's email and
stay
stuff.
on until we
Okay,
come.
all right, I will do. Okay.
Wait until we come back to you. Okay, you'll be up here on the screen.
The show
I'll just stay here.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to move you over. Hold on. Okay. Hope that wasn't too tough.
No, I'm just a small picture now. Okay.
There you go. Just of your just
George,
a fraction of your former
George
self.
says, sorry I was late. Great getting to meet you, Philip.
Thank you, George.
I want to remind everybody about the Voice of Indie podcast, Blog Talk Radio. Right after this show, the instructions will be on shortly, how to get over there. Episode rewind this Saturday, September 9th, right here where you're watching right now, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Savannah Loy is the guest on that rewind. Next week live will be Terry M. Brown again with her new release, An Enemy Like Me. So you don't want to miss that. And I don't know what else you've got to talk about, but
I think I'm all talked out.
You're all talked out?
I am.
Whoa, I didn't know that was possible, but okay.
Very funny.
All right, so until next time.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks. Bye.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen G's welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie, and you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DB.com.
You've been listening to WLFE-DB.com.